How are we doing, everyone? It has been a little bit after I had myself a brief stint/vacation in the amazing city of Las Vegas, but luckily we didn't have any crazy breaking news while I was away. But now that I'm back, let's get back to talking Bulls basketball again. And given we're about to head into the NBA Finals, we've got the draft now less than a month away and free agency just a little over a month away. In today's video, we're going to be talking about realistic, I have to emphasize realistic, but realistic free agent targets the Bulls could or should pursue this offseason with the limited cap space they have. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, I want to be clear. We are only going to be looking at free agent targets for the Bulls, not any trades or players under contract. I do realize there are some players who are likely going to be available by way of a trade, but they might not be free agents. And then for the free agents that are available this summer, we're also going to be making assumptions on which players may pick up or decline their player options, and also consider those free agents that are restricted versus unrestricted. But before even going into that, it's important to note that the Bulls' salary cap situation going into next season, what that looks like. This information is actually from spottrack.com, which is a great resource for researching cap sheets, cap projections, cap holds, luxury tax projections, all of that stuff. But bottom line, what you need to know is that, like last season, the Bulls are going to be operating as an over-the-cap team going into this season. Meaning, if they want to bring in free agents, they'll have to do it either by way of exceptions, either the mid-level exception or biannual exception, which I'll talk about what that means and some potential options. Or they have to bring in free agents via a sign and trade so they can use their salary to go over the cap. But based on the Bulls' current payroll, and this assumes guys like Derrick Jones Jr., Andre Drummond pick up their player options for a little over $3 million each, it also assumes the Bulls' cap holds for Vucevic, which is set to $33 million, Coby White's cap hold at $22.2 million, Io at $5.2, and Javonte Green cap hold at $1.8 million. Now, granted, it's unlikely the Bulls are going to be able to re-sign all of these players back, or even would want to re-sign all of them, and this also doesn't even include Patrick Beverley, because as productive as he was and was a solid contributor after the Bulls added him, he's going to want too much money that the Bulls simply can't afford. But for the four remaining free agents, it's possible not all of them are going to be coming back, but just strictly for understanding the Bulls' salary cap projections going into next season and going off the cap holds, which are way too high, especially for guys like Vucevic and Coby. But based on those assumptions, the Bulls' total payroll would equal around $161 million. The salary cap for next season is projected to be $134 million. The luxury tax line is projected to be $162 million. Very calculated to have this team be just below that tax line, with a cap projection of $161 million and luxury tax of $162. Very Reinsdorfian of the Bulls to do this. Yes, I think I just made up that word. Might need to get that trademark. Now, that $161 million on the books for the Bulls does include the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which is expected to be around $12.2 million. So they can use that to sign a player at the mid-level exception and still remain under the tax, which is good. And they have the biannual exception of $4.4 million, which is another tool they can use to sign free agents and still remain under the tax, or they can choose to hold on to it and use it down the line. The other piece, the cap hold for Vucevic at $33 million. That's way too high. I get it. The website has to put that in there as the hold for the max amount that that player could receive in a re-signing, but we all know Vucevic isn't getting $33 million next year. Not for the Bulls anyway, and I doubt from any team in the association, really. I've always said, both on the channel and on Twitter, if the Bulls do re-sign Vucevic, which I think they will for reasons I've explained before, in both parties, meaning Vuce and the Bulls, will come to the realization that they don't have any other options. Unless Vucevic is willing to take a steep discount, that is. But if the Bulls do re-sign Vucevic, I feel like it's going to be in the range of $17 to $19 million per year. Really $20 million being the max. That would be pushing it if the Bulls gave him $20 million a year, especially since the franchise knows they're working up against the luxury tax line. So let's say that Vuce goes on the books for $20 million. That's actually $13 million less than the cap hold that SpotTrack has for him at 33. And then for Coby White, I mean, he had a solid season, really picked things up at the end of the year, so much so that you had all the Coby haters starting to turn fans of his and wanting him to remain with the team, given he's still young and one of the few shooters on the Bulls. But he's not going to be getting a contract that will pay him over $22 million next season. He's not getting a rookie max extension. For me, I think something in the range of $12 to $14 million would make sense for Coby. Probably a max of 15. I wouldn't be shocked if he goes a little higher than that, but for the purposes of this video, we're going to assume Coby signs for $15 million. Dosunmu cap hold of $5.2 million. I mean, might be a bit high, but I think that cap hold is good for now, as well as Javonte Green at 1.8. So this would actually put the Bulls' overall salary total for next season on the books, guaranteed $141 million rather than $161, with large cap holds for both Vucevic and Coby. Still puts the Bulls over the cap, but also gives them considerable more room to work with and not being beholden to the tax line that would be right above them. Now again, it's possible the Bulls lose Vucevic in free agency or even Coby White depending on what kind of offer sheets these guys get from other teams, which would change a lot of the terms of their overall cap, so keep that in mind. But with the Bulls seemingly around $21 million below the luxury tax, which still includes the mid-level exception and the biannual exception, it gives the Bulls some options. Not many, but some options. The problem though is this isn't the best free agency class, and there aren't that many free agents that actually fill a need the Bulls have, which we all know is shooting, a floor general or a true point guard that can facilitate, and rim protection. Also some general depth in the front court, but those are the main things. So who are some of the free agents the Bulls could pursue, knowing the limitations they have on their cap sheet? Well, Harrison Barnes is the first player that comes to mind, although I think at the end of the day the Kings will look to re-sign him. But Barnes, while yes, older, and I'm sure some are thinking more about youth for this team considering the roster is aging, but Barnes, 31, combo forward, can play the 3 or 4, but mostly has played the 4 throughout his career, which the Bulls need a true power forward on this roster in that starting spot. Love Pat, and I'm not out on him, I just think he's better coming off the bench for his overall development and confidence. And for Barnes, solid scorer, decent rebounder, smart player, high IQ, something the Bulls need, and a decent three-point shooter as well. Takes care of the ball, he's efficient, he had one of the highest true shooting percentages in the league last season, and was a big piece for the success of that Kings team. And also played all 82 games, which is rare to see in today's NBA. I think Barnes would be a great pickup for the Bulls that is somewhat realistic. The biggest problem with getting Barnes is, one, the Kings are going to want to keep him and will be able to offer him the most money. And if the Bulls did want him, it would have to be done via a sign and trade because Barnes is going to command more than just the mid-level exception. And while the Bulls could offer Barnes a decent payday of over $15 million per season because they're already operating over the cap, they are going to need to acquire him by completing a sign and trade, which is easier said than done to get all parties involved to agree on that transaction. But anyway, that's one free agent I would love for the Bulls to take a look at that I think would be a good fit as long as it wasn't on some crazy contract where it becomes more of an overpay than you have to worry about down the line. Another player that will be a free agent that I feel the Bulls should pursue, and has actually already been rumored to be of interest of the Bulls, and that's Christian Wood. Now, I already made a video on Wood and how he would fit with the team and the practicality of bringing a player like him in. Wood, yes, does have his flaws defensively, can be a little inconsistent when it comes to his overall efficiency on the court and offense as well, but can give you scoring, rebounding, again, also size and some depth, whether coming off the bench or in the starting lineup. The reason getting Wood is actually realistic is because it's been reported he's willing to sign for the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which is projected to be around $12.2 million. Thus, the Bulls would actually have the ability to sign Wood by using that exception despite being over the cap. The question is, there will likely be a fair amount of teams who would like to get Wood on that team-friendly deal for the mid-level exception. Is Christian Wood going to want to come to Chicago over some other teams? I don't know. Tough to say depending on what type of role Wood is looking for next season. Again, assuming the Mavs don't re-sign him, which it sounds like that's likely going to be the case. The next free agent on the list that would be a realistic target is Josh Hart. The only thing that wouldn't make this realistic is, well, one, he has a player option and could opt into the final year of his deal, which would no longer make him a free agent this offseason, but it's been reported that Hart will likely decline his player option to secure a longer and more lucrative deal. And that's the other piece that doesn't make it as realistic as maybe I would like, because it's probable the Knicks are going to look to re-sign him on a longer term deal given the type of impact he had for that team after the trade deadline, especially on the defensive end, and you know Tibbs loves guys like Josh Hart that are just dogs on the court. But if the Bulls were able to snag him away from the Knicks, either by way of a sign and trade of some kind, because it's unlikely Hart would likely go for the mid-level exception when he's going to be getting better offers than that from other teams. Another guy I would like to see the Bulls pursue as a free agent target is Seth Curry. You talk about the Bulls needing shooters. He's a shooter. Obviously, he's not the same caliber of player or shooter as his brother, but Seth, over the course of his career, especially the past few seasons, has become such a great lights-out shooter, perfect on the catch and shoot. This past season, his numbers were down a bit, but that was primarily on lower usage and less minutes on a Nets team that was initially contending, then brought in other guards after the trade. But prior to that, the season before, he was on the Sixers and the Nets. He shot 42% from 3 on 6 attempts per game. That is elite shooting, some of the best in the league. I mean, Curry doesn't really offer much outside of his shooting. He has become a bit more dynamic of a scorer with his ability to slash to the hoop and finish at the rim, but for the most part, this would be a play for the Bulls just to get some shooting, which they so desperately need, and then they can hopefully address some of their other holes through other potential free agency signings. And as for Curry, would the mid-level exception work? probably even less than the mid-level exception. I mean, the guy was making $8.5 million last season. He's going to be 33 this summer, so it's not like we can expect for him to get some big long-term deal. And because of that, I think this is a good option for the Bulls, as they would actually have the money to sign him, and he's a sharpshooter. Bulls need shooters. And then finally, the last free agent target I have on the list. It's yet another shooter, and this one is probably more of wishful thinking than anything else, and that's Max Strus, who the Bulls actually had on their roster back in the 2019-20 season as a two-way player, and has since blossomed into this solid offensive player who has been a key piece for the Miami Heat in their playoff run. Strus is going to be a sought-after free agent. I mean, anytime you have a player who can shoot threes at a high volume on a 35+% clip, you better believe in today's NBA, teams are going to want that. He's also been able to impact the game more than just his outside shooting in the last couple of seasons, by shooting it well from mid-range, getting inside in the paint, and dropping floaters. He's even improved his overall passing and court vision. And the difference between him and a guy like Seth Curry is Strus is only 27, still in his prime, and while Strus will command more money than someone like Curry, it's not going to be some astronomical amount, say like Jordan Poole or Tyler Hero that they received, or even Duncan Robinson before him. Like Austin Reeves is a player that I would have on this list as a free agent target for the Bulls to pursue, but he's going to get overpaid. The market for him is going to be very high, and the Bulls aren't going to be able to afford him even if they executed a sign and trade, because it would put them over the luxury tax. But Max Strus, on the other hand, I can see a world in which you could get him for the full mid-level exception. Now, you'll probably say, well, why wouldn't the Heat do that then? Why wouldn't they just re-sign him? Well, the Heat already have $173 million guaranteed on their books next season. That's without re-signing their free agents like Kevin Love, Max Strus, Gabe Vincent. Gabe Vincent has also been great for them. He's come up big time since Tyler Hero has been injured. That's another player they're going to have to give up more money to retain him. And thanks to the new CBA, since the Heat are already going to be paying into the luxury tax even with just their current guaranteed contracts, it's going to trigger that second tier threshold, which is going to limit their ability to use the full mid-level exception, which would mean the Bulls in theory could offer more than the Heat with the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, because the Bulls never pay the tax. Now, I do say this one is more wishful thinking because I think some team will likely offer Strus more than the mid-level exception, which the Bulls would not be able to afford because it would put them over the tax line, and we all know the Bulls going into the tax isn't happening with this ownership. But there is a world in which they could execute a sign and trade while also shedding some salary to be able to afford Strus. It's just a matter of how creative the front office can get to execute on some of these transactions. Of course, there are other free agents that I didn't mention because they simply wouldn't be good or realistic targets based on the contracts they're likely to be receiving. Guys like Kyle Kuzma, Chris Middleton, Fred VanVleet, among others. But you let me know in the comments, which free agents would you like to see the Bulls pursue this summer? As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.